which is a 10-week educational program that's completely open source. You can take it for free. You can use it in your own community to educate the world. So this is my first Bitcoin. It's born just after Bitcoin became legal tender in El Salvador. But who are we? What do we do? I want to explain it to you. I want to tell a story based on our vision. You can find it on our website. Everything is transparent, which is my first Bitcoin is built around a core concept that independent, impartial, community-led Bitcoin education will change the world. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of those words to you to really explain what we do. And not only by words, but I want to make it visualized. I want you to see what we do. But first, how do we do this? Because this is a great mission. It's slightly different, or it's very different compared to all the other educational programs out there. We do this by open sourcing everything. That means that if you want to do something similar in your country, in your place, in your community, go for it. What it means to open source everything is not to only open source resources like the Bitcoin diploma that I just mentioned. I'll go a little bit deeper into it in a bit. But also like a teacher lesson plan. So it's more of the guide for the educators that want to teach in their local communities. It's available, completely open source. A meetup blueprint. So like, how are you going to find your students? Where are you going to find the people that want to learn about Bitcoin? We created a blueprint, an open source document you can find on our GitHub. The same about like how to get started with your first class. If you have the ambition to do this and you have no experience, you're not the only one. We've been trying to do this since 2021, and there are many more out here that have been facing the same struggles. So by open sourcing everything, we make everything available for you or for anyone else. In the future, there will be more open sourced materials and resources like accounting and a couple of other things. But for now, I just want to focus on like Bitcoin diploma being a 10-week program for everyone who wants to learn. So we started in El Salvador, and just a couple of highlights. So far, we taught and educated over 30,000 students from this Bitcoin diploma and some other resources yet. On top of that, we are working with the Ministry of Education, MINED, in El Salvador to infiltrate, to penetrate public school system with this knowledge, with this Bitcoin diploma courses in a kind of similar version. Additionally, we are training and teaching over 700 teachers from public schools to go back to their own school to educate what they learned based on this whole teacher training program. So the goal is to have on every single school in El Salvador at least one Bitcoin expert, one Bitcoin educator that has been going through this program. And then currently we're building a new curriculum for the younger audiences. So the Bitcoin diploma that I mentioned earlier is for, let's say, high school age. But then we also want to serve the younger children, or maybe even different target audiences like companies or name it. So the goal is to create more open source resources for whatever audience is out there. So we're working on one for the younger kids together with the Little Hodler team and with the Ministry of Education in El Salvador as well, which will also be created open source. So that's the only string attached to this whole plan, is to make it available to you guys as well. But this is just only El Salvador. This talk that I'm going to give right now, that I'm giving, is about global and community-led education. So why stop there? But before I talk about the world, it's just some pictures to give you an idea that it's not just some buzzwords. This is a meeting with teachers in the country, together with the Ministry of Education. They are learning about Bitcoin, and this is a day-to-day activity for my first Bitcoin. On the left, on the right for you guys, you see the adjusted version of this open source document.
Do the teachers go through the 10-week program?
The teachers go through the 10-week program? Yeah, but they are going to be teaching this exact same program, so they're prepared in order to go back to their own school to learn, to teach their students about Bitcoin. So if you've been following us on our Twitter, you knew this. If you don't, be inspired, because this is just the beginning. And as I mentioned, this is only El Salvador. So what we do is we want to change the world. And by putting everything open source, that means that other people can start to implement the exact same resources in their own local context, in their local community. So our resources are being used in at least 20 countries right now. I'll elaborate on that a bit later. By 30 plus projects. The workbook is being translated into 30 languages. And this is our third Bitcoin Educators Unconference, just to give you the scope that what we do, yes, it's El Salvador, but the mission is the world. And all these languages are being, like all the workbooks, are being translated into more and more languages as we speak. I saw yesterday the team in Indonesia finished their translations. The Dutch one is finished recently, Italian, go on and go on. And again, because we put everything open source, we want to encourage everyone to play a role in Bitcoin education and Bitcoin adoption. It can be with the translations, it should be with so much more. So what does this look like if you go to a public school in El Salvador and you want to learn about Bitcoin? Well, we just do step A to B, and after that there's still a lot to do. But it starts with, of course, Bitcoin classes based on our Bitcoin diploma, which is a workbook of 10 chapters. I have one here. If you want to check it out, just come to me. We got the English one and the Spanish one here. Take a look. And in these chapters, we educate not just about Bitcoin, not just about the Lightning Network, but we teach students about money first. Why do we need money? What is money? Crucial elements in order to start learning about Bitcoin. The history of money, etc., etc. And then only in chapter 6, we introduce our students to Bitcoin. And again, if you're curious to read more about this, go to our GitHub, download the Bitcoin Diploma 2024, and start using it. And after that, going through this 10-week program, we invite Bitcoin educators once in like a while to come to so-called graduations. So what this means is that all the students are proving to Bitcoiners their knowledge, their skills. So Gabe, he's here. He's been one of the verifiers. He's sitting there, and on this morning, on this afternoon, students that have been taught from the Bitcoin diploma come to his table, and they just have to prove what they can do, whether it's answering some questions, whether it's receiving Bitcoin, whether it's sending Bitcoin, or making a backup of your wallet. And after succeeding in these 4 steps, after finishing this whole graduation ceremony, everyone goes to whatever place on the school it is, take a seat, and be very extremely fucking proud. Because they are leaders in their country, and you can feel it. If you're on this place, you see all these students going through the diploma, 10 weeks, proving that they can do it, Bitcoiners from all over the world coming to their school, in their local community, to see what they've been doing. And like they're the ones changing El Salvador, and also hopefully inspiring you to change your own country as well. They all receive a certificate at the end of their graduation, bring it home, be very proud. And again, this is only A to B. So there is still a lot more to learn, and that's something that we encourage as well. All right, so that's like the practical thing. Go from the first class to a graduation, and we've done this like thousands of times now in terms of amount of students. I also want to show you this because, okay, that's fun. We go from chapter 1 to chapter 10. We teach them about Bitcoin, but that's not just it. It's about what Bitcoin will teach us. It's like it goes a layer further. Critical thought, personal responsibility, self-sovereignty, to lower your time preference, look into the future, and that changes everything. And if you've been following my first Bitcoin for a little while, you know like this is really what we want to do. We want to change the world that does not just stop with sending your Bitcoin transaction. It means that you change your life. It means that you feel empowered by Bitcoin, empowered by Bitcoiners, and all together we continue on this mission. All right, so back to the vision that I mentioned before. I want to go through our vision step by step, just so you have a bit of an idea how we are realizing this. I'm highlighting 4 parts here. So we are independent. We are impartial. We are focusing on community-led education for the entire world. Being independent means that you are not going to influence what we do. We are creating things, put it open source, but we're not going to put in our workbook what you want us to put in there. And a similar kind of thought comes back in this impartial. We are completely transparent, and 65% of our funding comes from the grassroots community, from people like you here, that want to support us on our mission to reach as many people as possible. That's completely no strings attached, and that will never be. We will be independent and impartial. The same counts for corporate funding that we receive from companies that sponsor us, or grants like OpenSat, Human Rights Foundation, but the same applies. We will always be impartial, which means that we are also like kind of empowering ourselves to like go a step further than the average Bitcoin project. Just to give you an idea, this is our geyser page. So far we raised almost 3 Bitcoin completely from the community. And this is like what you should know about my first Bitcoin. Because again, we do this all together. And without the community, without grassroots support, we can do way less, we can do nothing. Okay, the second word I want to highlight, the third one actually, is the world. So as I just showed in the beginning, the whole story originates in El Salvador in September, on that day when people were on the streets protesting, reading the newspaper. But that's just the beginning. So we, because everything is open source, are reaching more and more people all over the world. I know John loves maps, so I put a map in the presentation. There are going to be more maps. Get ready. As you can see, there are just a couple of flags. It's on the wall in our office and in my first Bitcoin. You see Kenya, Brazil, El Salvador, Dominican Republic, more and more. These people that educate in their own local community meet up once in a month, meet up digitally to be a network, to show their proof of work to others, and to all educate from these same resources. I'll explain a little bit more about this later on, but I want to highlight that we don't just educate in El Salvador, we educate everywhere, indirectly. So far, this node network, which is like the collective of Bitcoin educators that use this diploma that I just showed you, is called the node network. We have full nodes, we have light nodes, and our aim is to like decentralize everything, to be decentralized, which also means that we don't want to be in charge of this network. So from all those projects and all the countries that are joining this network, we are not dictating what they should do. They should be inspiring each other in order to empower their students, in order to learn from each other, to create a better ecosystem of Bitcoin educators, to know that you're not alone, to know that you can learn from others, to know that someone else may be creating resources that you are missing, to know that someone is successful in a certain aspect that you never thought about. And I think that's the importance of open source education, that it's not just us doing it with our team in El Salvador, it's about everyone doing it all together, including every single individual here in this place today. So once a month we have a voting session in which we vote for the new applicants, for people that want to be part of the network, because we don't just accept everyone. We want to maintain our values, which means that all the educators should be independent, they should be impartial as well, community-based, Bitcoin only, they should focus on empowerment over profits, and maintain like a high quality of education. As long as you check these boxes, apply. Become part of the network, educate in your own country, and be part of this movement as well, because, again, we do it all together. So, just to give you an overview, of course, El Salvador highlighted, that's where it originated. But as a network, we're all over the world, from Indonesia to Hong Kong to India, 2 projects, Kenya. And I just listed them all here in case you want to check it out. I also want to encourage you that if your country is not listed in here and no one is part of the network yet, please get started, because that means something's missing. That means that you should go to our GitHub, take the diploma, bring 10 people in a classroom, start teaching, create some proof of work, and join other educators. Create more value for everyone. So if you have thoughts about maybe doing this, let me know after this talk. I'll get you started with our resources. But, okay, countries, that's fun. I just wanted to give a big shout out to all the individual projects that are using the same resources as we do in El Salvador. I'm not going to read them all, but they should be highlighted. It's not just me for my Bitcoin, not just my first Bitcoin. It's all of these projects that take the Bitcoin diploma, take people from their own township, from their own community, their own church, their own whatever it is, and teach and empower students, and then empower others in that area as well. You can find all their projects on GitHub as well, with what they're doing. Maybe there's someone in your country or your area as well. Connect them to these projects. They have ongoing cohorts every 10 weeks, and then they will plan something new. Just going to highlight a couple of them. Bitcoin Victoria Falls in Zambia, Cuba Bitcoin, Operation Bitcoin, shout out to Gabe. I don't know where he is. There he is. The Bitcoin veterans. We got projects Riktok Songoti in India. We have The Core in Kenya. Bismarck Bitcoin Meetup is a new node that's teaching from our resources. Bitcoin in Indonesia will start 2 cohorts next month in English and in the local language, of which I forgot the name again. Bahasa, thanks John. And this is just a snapshot of what's happening in the network of Bitcoin educators. It's not just individual educators having fun and teaching people, but there's a lot of value created by the network. There's a lot of empowerment happening in the network. And I just wanted to list a couple of examples to give you an idea. So for example, one of the nodes in the network is The Core, Felix. He's a great guy. He is starting to teach his 5th cohort now. So he's been educating hundreds of people about Bitcoin already, online. And from the graduates from his classes, people that received their certificate, some of them started their own community in their own local area. So, for example, Milfor, Papush, and Val from Haiti. That's Bitcoin, Bitcoin Haiti. Check out what they're doing as well with the same resources. Or Rikto Kongati in India. They were graduates from Felix. Bitcoin Africa Story is a project as well, originating now from Nigeria. These were people that once were alumni and are teachers now. And this is exactly what I mean with saying how Bitcoin education should empower individuals. So it's not you learn something and that's it. Once you have the knowledge, that's where your journey starts, to bring other people on. And this is going to happen more and more, that as soon as you understand it, soon as you have that eureka moment, that you want to be part of it. Well, again, everything is open source. Go, get started. Another example of the synergy between the projects is Bitcoin Policy UK. So one of them is called Huxley. He is focusing on educating teachers. So like if you are just a graduate and you want to start to become a teacher, you need more knowledge. We don't necessarily have to provide it, but we have a network, a collective of educators who can be playing a role in that. So they're doing teacher onboarding training. Bitcoin School Argentina, one of those projects, they started a great podcast lately. I think they published 5 or 6 episodes so far with other educators in the network. And just highlighting each other's works, learning from each other, and putting it out there. Like, you're stronger together. We're greater than the sum of our parts. And that's, once again, visible in just this podcast. Bitcoin Ubuntu, maybe you've heard about it, a project in South Africa. They were co-hosting some of the classes in Kenya, online classes, and after gaining enough experience, he was like, okay, I can do this myself now. So he partnered up with another project in South Africa, Bitcoin Luxion, and they're starting, I think, their next cohort this week, or they started last week. Cuba Bitcoin, Bitcoin Dominicana, they're like close neighbors, starting to team up and do online cohorts together. We have the Canadian Bitcoin Educators Network, and yes, Bitcoin 80 again, that are working on translations. there's so much we can do all together as soon as we're connected to each other. So I really hope that you found some connections today to get started. I already mentioned it, the core. Felix is inviting a lot of guest teachers from other nodes in the network, because everyone is using the same resources. If you are if you prefer to talk about chapter 1, 2, 3, and someone else 4, 5, 6, you can team up. You can connect teachers to students, and like really find the synergy. So these are all products of a network that wouldn't have existed without the network. And again, we're greater than the sum of our parts. And I just want to keep repeating myself, because I think that's where the real value is if we want to change the world as Bitcoiners altogether. So this also means that the network has a lot of Bitcoin graduations all over the world. So for example, MTH in Honduras, they graduated 6 or 7 cohorts already. Just a picture. Students from Honduras being taught, they learned exactly the same thing from our Bitcoin diploma as we do in El Salvador. The project in Zambia, Bitcoin Victoria Falls. They're on their 2nd cohort right now. This was their first group, starting with a small cohort, just a couple of students, but getting more and more experienced. And also like students, one of them, I don't know exactly which one, but he started his own Bitcoin taxi service called Bitwheels as a result of like finishing like a whole cohort. This is the newest node in the network, Pleb Together Strong in India, in Goa. Finished their first cohort as well, starting a 2nd cohort next week. I just put one in from El Salvador too. This is from my first Bitcoin team. Graduations, cohorts, always ongoing. Canada, graduations too. The Canadian Bitcoin Educators Network. I think they had a 4th cohort last month, finished, starting to prepare for a next one. Well, you get the idea, and it can keep going and going and going. Projects, they're all independent, impartial, taking the resources, going to their own community, to their own people in their own language, teaching about Bitcoin. I think this is the last one, Guatemala, Bitcoin Lake, Lago Bitcoin, teaching as well. And the cool thing is that this is a project that's close to the circular economy. So on one hand, we have the practical use of Bitcoin, but that doesn't go alone just on its own. I think we can really make a difference with this educational part in it, because education leads to adoption. If we just focus on adoption only, we're not making progress. Cuba Bitcoin, Bitcoin Ekazi. Well, you get the idea. So once a month, all these educators come together in a so-called General Assembly. They meet up and they share what they've been learning. They share what struggles they have, what challenges, things they need, or, for example, celebrate success, which is, I think, a great part as well, to just come together and be grateful and be happy. And we made a little compilation of what's really happening in the network with all these individual educators. So let me try to play this.
Starting our 4th.
All of our efforts right now are focused on making sure we graduate our 4th cohort, which is growth success, people having...
Our efforts will be exponential to make the Bitcoin diploma with valid 41 million valid diploma.
I think that people graduate from 12 to different countries.
We'll be doing our own cohorts here locally with Bitcoin adoption. So I was approached because they were interested in working through the material of the Bitcoin diploma.
These funds will pay for workbooks, salaries of our professors who are teaching at our Siglo XXI class.
We are making progress with the translation of the Bitcoin diploma group in the French.
So I'm doing a project at my school which I think that you'll all really enjoy. It's a project called Tribute to Turing. So I have about 150 students over the course of 4 days that will be making their way through my classroom, and I'm going to be teaching them about cryptography.
That's an update from Operation Bitcoin. As you may or may not know, our focus is thematic node, and our focus is primarily on military and good service members.
for all you actually doing the field of classes during the week, 5 days in the week, and then for this matter, about 18 field of classes, which were the average of 40 students class and 15 active students.
In the minute program, the second phase of the teacher training has started. So as you know, we have taught 130 teachers from the public school system. For our updates, we had a meet up this past week at 72 registrants and 48 attendees, which was really big numbers for us.
We had announced we were going to be implementing chatbots. Now we have our I call it MGK, which is basically a resource, let's say, merchants, people who might need immediate information regarding Bitcoin.
Work was printed off with a few hard copies for students. We will be scheduling the class for July. Very excited for that. Grateful to be here. Thanks everyone for all awesome updates.
Great to see you everyone. Really excited stuff. Really enjoyed the course so far.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate all the work you're doing.
Good morning, everyone.
Unfortunately, not all of them, or just only a couple of them could be here. So I just want to emphasize everyone to check these projects out as well, because we are My First Bitcoin El Salvador, but there's so many other projects doing the exact same thing out there in their own local context with less resources, and they're just getting started. And that leads me to this following point, which is that this is our third Bitcoin Educators Unconference. With our previous 2 unconferences, we included a 21% grant on the ticket sales. So from all the ticket sales, we collected more or less $1,000 to hand out to the network of educators. One of the projects that you just saw received this grant after our first Educators Unconference in El Salvador. Another project received this grant after our unconference in Madeira in February, early this year. And all these projects are fully independent. They are impartial. They're using open source resources, and they're just putting the word out in their own community. So I would encourage everyone, send $10, $5, whatever you can miss, to this QR code. After this unconference, we'll be collecting the total amount. We'll be distributing it to one of these projects of this decentralized network. So it's not going to be for us, My First Bitcoin. It's going to be to empower one of these individuals, one of these projects that are doing the hard work in their own local community. So as I'll keep this QR code on the screen, let's just watch 2 more minutes of what they've been doing in the network and be inspired and contribute with whatever amount of sats you can. So once again, if you want to support one of these projects, this is the QR code. You may have seen it on your cups when you were drinking something, or somewhere on the flyers that were handed out. Okay, final part that I didn't elaborate on yet, which I'm gonna keep it short, is that all these projects are community-led educational projects, which is something that the panel before me also already mentioned. That's where we make the real difference if we do this peer-to-peer education. So for example, the Bitcoin, Operation Bitcoin is really focusing on veterans. The way how veterans are being taught is different than my mom will ever learn about Bitcoin. The same for Bitcoin School Argentina. They've been focusing on so-called cuevas, which is the black market exchange houses for peso to dollar. They need Bitcoin in a way different context than I would ever teach to some of you. Bitcoin Ballers Academy is really focusing on youth together with sports. This is a totally different way of reaching your target audience compared to how we would do it with our own family, for example. Bitcoin Data, they're not part of the Node network, but I wanted to include them because I specifically teach for women in Kenya or in Africa. The core is educating people with online classes. Again, my mom would never focus on something that's online cohort. So we have all these different projects with all doing their own local context, with all their local and cultural differences as well. And I think that's a very important step that we also should be aware of when we start educating others. So, having that said, Bitcoin education in your church, club, school, community, whatever it is, just join us. Don't ask for permission. Take the resources, get started, get off zero, and change your local community. Talk to me after this if you want to get some help, some inspiration, whatever. But get started. Thank you.